Welcome everybody to Go Local Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. Obviously a special edition. President Joe Biden has announced he will not seek re-election. We go down to the University of Virginia. We've got Jennifer Lawless. She's the chair of the political science department. Professor Lawless, thanks so much for breaking into your Sunday afternoon and giving us some time and expertise. Your thoughts, immediate decision by Joe Biden.
I think that, like most Democrats across the country, I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the news. It's bittersweet because he's certainly been an incredible president. Democrats are hard-pressed to find somebody who's accomplished more legislatively, but the last several weeks have made it increasingly clear that the path to beating Donald Trump was becoming more and more uphill. So Biden's decision to get out of the race, I think, injects yet another jolt to the system and gives the Democrats a lifeline for November.
So does this decision sort of, not only does it recast the vote of old guy versus old guy and who's more old guy, but does it create some problems for, and I'll get into Trump in a moment and their strategy, but does it give it some, from the Democratic Party standpoint, some new energy?
I think the biggest change that we're going to see is a closing of the enthusiasm gap. And this will likely be the case regardless of whoever the nominee is. Democrats were beginning to feel really defeated. They felt like this was a never-ending talking point during the news cycle, that Joe Biden was not able to launch a vigorous campaign. They were very, very hard-pressed to counter any of the critiques that Donald Trump made during the debate or that they saw at the convention, because the news cycle was still all about Joe Biden and whether or not he was staying in the race. And we were also beginning to see shifts in terms of polling regarding competitive Senate and House races, which meant not only that it seemed like Donald Trump would win the presidency, but that he might actually have unified control in Washington. And that's bad for morale among Democratic voters. So I think the immediate effect of this will be more enthusiasm among Democrats and a lot of independents who are sort of holding their noses and casting a vote for one or the other.
So there's been a lot of talk, some very public, like Jim Carville, saying this opens, a situation like this opens the way to having a open convention, a number of candidates participating, lots of energy, lots of debate. Nancy Pelosi, behind the scenes, supposedly advocated for an open convention as well. Is Vice President Harris a slam dunk now?
Well, Joe Biden has obviously endorsed her. Bill Clinton has just come out. Senator Mark Warner from Virginia has. The idea of an open convention is one thing, but if you don't have other candidates for that open convention, it becomes difficult to do. And it's not like there have been others out there saying that if Joe Biden stepped out of the race, they would be interested in seeking the nomination. So Harris being anointed versus Harris winning might be a difference with no real distinction, because it's not obviously the case that there are others who are willing to compete with her. At this point, it looks like she probably is a done deal, but if the last 3 weeks have taught us anything, it's that lots of things happen that we can't.
Yeah, this is the most predictable race, right? Let's jump to it. Let's say it is Donald Trump versus Vice President Harris. You know, if I'm doing op research for the Republicans per se, I'm not sure I don't mind this. What was her major assignment in the Biden-Harris administration? It was to control the borders, and that has probably been the biggest failure of the Biden administration and the biggest area in which they have had, the Democrats have had the widest gap with the Republicans. Isn't that an easy one for Donald Trump to pin on Vice President Harris?
Look, they're going to pin on Vice President Harris Joe Biden's entire record and everything that they don't like about him. But the reality is that, and Donald Trump should certainly know this, he had put Mike Pence in charge of COVID, and that didn't seem to work out that well. The reality is the buck stops with the president. And I don't think it's likely that there are a whole bunch of people who would otherwise vote for Harris, but then they're going to hear Donald Trump say that she was unable to secure the border, and then they're going to decide that they're going to stay home or vote for a third-party candidate. Basically, anybody that liked Joe Biden's record, anybody that liked Joe Biden's legislative accomplishments, anybody that liked Joe Biden in the White House, but simply thinks that he's too old to serve another term, is an obvious Harris voter. In addition, she appeals to some demographic groups in terms of enthusiasm and voter turnout that Joe Biden didn't. Young people are going to be more receptive to a 58-year-old female candidate, and a female candidate of color at that. Black women who are obviously have always been sort of the backbone of the Democratic Party and have supported Democratic candidates at unprecedented levels will be even more enthusiastic about Kamala Harris. So I think Donald Trump can try to attack her on immigration, can try to attack her on all of these issues. I don't know that the sting is any worse than it would have been attacking Biden on those issues.
Okay, but that's just helping solidify the base, right? Those young voters that Biden collected last time, black women, enthusiasm, maybe helps with black men and some other minority groups. But, in this kind of race with this type of division in the country, it's probably going to come down to suburban women in swing districts and swing states across the country. Does Harris help the Democratic Party peel some of those votes back away from Trump and over?
She does. First, let me just note that J.D. Vance, the whole purpose of him being on that ticket is to try and peel away some of the blue-collar voters in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016, that Donald Trump won, but who then went to Joe Biden in 2020. Harris solidifies the base in a way that somewhat neutralizes the potential advantages of Vance. In addition to that, she's probably one of the most compelling people when it comes to speaking about reproductive rights and women's rights. That's what suburban women care about. We've seen in the 2022 midterm elections, we saw in the off-year elections in 2021 and 2023, that abortion for suburban women is still at the top of their list of issues they care about. And both Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have done a lot either to overturn Roe versus Wade or to make statements that are even more draconian than that. And so Harris is an excellent mouthpiece regarding reproductive rights. She also is able to prosecute a case against Donald Trump that Joe Biden just wasn't able to do this time around.
Okay, but a great political pundit once told me that VPs don't matter. In this race, VPs matter, don't they? J.D. Vance is the younger version of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is now the old guy in the race, not Joe Biden anymore. So the Democrats are going to be running commercials with him calling people the wrong name and him stumbling and falling and all those types of things. So there's some vulnerability on the Republican side of Trump being cast as being old. But on the Democratic side, they need to come up with a Democratic VP candidate who offsets some of that progressivism that may be perceived as excessive with Harris. Who's the leading candidates to be Democratic VP nominee?
It looks like on the short list right now are candidates like Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, who's Gabby Gifford's husband. He's very popular in Arizona. He's very popular in the Senate. He's seen as more moderate, although his voting record is, quite progressive. Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, is seen as a candidate. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, is somebody else on that list. So it's true that she will likely pick somebody that is seen as more moderate. But I think in this case, what has happened is that J.D. Vance, in a lot of ways, becomes for the Democrats what Kamala Harris was for the Republicans. The Republicans were trying to say that voting for Joe Biden is voting for Kamala Harris. That was a way to secure their base, because their base could think of nothing they would like less than somebody like Kamala Harris. Well, the tables have turned now, and the Democrats are able to say, look, Donald Trump is 78 years old. He's not able to walk and chew gum at the same time. Age now becomes an issue on the other side of the aisle. And J.D. Vance is a 39-year-old with 16 months of political experience. And so, and by the way, he's incredibly conservative and has said things that are generally offensive to most people who have been born in the 20th or 21st century. So, I think that there are opportunities here. I do not think that this is in any way, shape, or form going to be anything other than a very close contest. I just think that Joe Biden dropping out, and whether it be Kamala Harris or somebody else at the top of the ticket, now the nominee, means that the Democrats have a shot.
Yeah, I'm going to push off your Senate selection. I want to go back to the other VP Democratic options. It has to be a governor, don't you think? Has to be somebody with some perceived executive branch decisions, knows how to run a budget, knows how to be able to administer. Whether it's reality of being the vice president or not, it's how you balance the ticket. And all due respect to the North Carolina governor, you got to look him up in Wikipedia to find out who the governor of North Carolina. Shapiro, Beshear, Pritzker, they're much more high profile governors across this country. Aren't they a better selection? Because you got 3 months. You can't introduce and educate everybody on everything.
Well, I would push back a little and suggest that if Kamala Harris is at the top of the ticket already has executive experience. She's the sitting vice president. That's the executive branch of government.
Yeah,
So
I think in the vice president's powers, it goes to breaking ties in the United States Senate. Then she got assignment on immigration, and other than that, it is, I believe, the death of second-tier world leaders, primarily in countries that we have difficult foreign relations with. It's just not. I don't think you're going to convince a lot of people that the vice president is a war-torn veteran of executive decision-making.
I don't think that most people understand or care about what executive decision-making even is. I think at this point, Democrats will vote for any Democratic ticket. Republicans will vote for any Republican ticket. It's about generating enthusiasm among those bases. And as far as independents are concerned, it really does come down to the issues. Now, the upside to the thing that needs to be considered in all of these cases, whether it's a governor or whether it's somebody in the Senate, is what happens if there's a vacancy. And in Arizona with Mark Kelly, for example, a Democratic governor would appoint a replacement for the rest of his term. So that means that the Democrats don't lose a seat there. These are things to take into account, especially if part of the reason for replacing Joe Biden at the top of the ticket was to come up with some possibility for Democrats to hold the Senate and maybe even win back the House.
So, I think everybody's been questioning some Democratic Party strategy decision-making. Was 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday, when pretty much everyone was at the beach or the lake or in a canoe or enjoying the outdoors in the dead of summer, the prime time to make this announcement?
Well, he will be speaking at some point this week, but it used to be the case that you would break this kind of news, not this kind of news, but important political news on one of the Sunday morning shows, when there were Sunday morning shows that anybody watched, because that was what then set the agenda for the following news week. And so the reality is that tomorrow morning, this is going to be the front page of every newspaper, whether it's a local paper or whether it's a national
Some of the
paper.
newspapers in this country have already put to bed Monday's edition.
That is true, although I would think that this might be one example where they might, sort of rethink that.
Probably not.
Look, the other thing is everybody, whether they're in a canoe or in a kayak or sitting on a beach, it's not the same as it used to be. Everybody's on their phone.
That's the right answer. Well done.
Everybody's watching
You
what's
got there.
going on. So.
Yep, you got there. Okay.
Thanks.
So if I'm Donald Trump, don't I like this? Very progressive, black woman. Boy, this is going to play to the good old boys in the suburbs. We can press all those hot button issues, DEI and da-da-da-da-da, and I can masterfully pull out the Karl Rove playbook of Republicanism and really hit all these things. Plus, she used to be the Attorney General of California. She's had to have let off a number of murderers who have done all sorts of horrible things, plus the fact that she was in charge of the border, and we already know the Republicans have about 20 ads already produced relative to what some of the people who came across the border have done to Americans. So walk me through how the Democrats are going to offset those level of nonstop political attacks.
2 things. The first is a growing body of research finds that there are backlash effects when male candidates attack female candidates aggressively, regardless of whether those female candidates are completely able to weather that aggression. And there's nothing to suggest that Kamala Harris is not. But what that means is not only that the female candidate's supporters dig in because they think that she was treated in a way that was sexist, but there's a backlash effect where the support for the sexist lobbying candidate winds up taking a little bit of a hit. In close elections, a few thousand votes in either direction in certain districts or in certain states is all you need for that to be a problem. And so that strategy, I think they're going to need to, the Republicans are going to need to thread a needle and figure out how to do it. The second thing that I think is the biggest indication that the Republicans are worried is within about 20 minutes of Joe Biden's announcement, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, started floating the idea that you can't just replace your nominee partway through the summer. This violates all sorts of rules and regulations. If they weren't concerned about this, they wouldn't be trying to all of a sudden care about the rule of law, which, by the way, is not on their side.
Okay, so let me go to the first point. I think Donald Trump proved, whether it was appropriate or not, was incredibly aggressive with Hillary Clinton in 2016, and in the creepiest of ways, lurking behind her in presidential debates, invading her physical space, beyond insulting her, beyond wanting to lock her up, beyond all the personal attacks. Don't we have a little gender equality in punching each other in the nose now?
So I have said, and I said in 2016, and I have said since then, that I think that 2016 told us that very little about sexism in this country and quite a bit about Clintonism in this country. And the rules of the game just don't play out the same way for Hillary Clinton. The negative affect that people had toward Hillary Clinton was literally multiple generations worth of it. She had been on the front page of every newspaper for 20 years, not more. People had such venomous reactions toward her. The vitriol was unlike anything that we had seen. And it was just not your typical election cycle. The reality was that, she received the same share of the Democratic vote that other presidential candidates did. And in fact, she won the popular vote. But voter turnout for her didn't have the same level of enthusiasm. She couldn't count on the base the same way that Donald Trump could at that point. I think the Democrats have since learned a lesson, and I don't think that Donald Trump has. Also, Donald Trump hates Kamala Harris. And I think we saw during his speech Thursday night at the convention that despite how disciplined he promises he will be, he can't follow through. And I find it very unlikely that he's not going to get so upset and she's not going to get so under his skin that he will say something that even for Donald Trump might be beyond the pale. That's what the Democrats are hoping for.
Is there such a thing?
Time will tell. But remember, his base doesn't have to turn on him. He just needs a sliver of independent voters who say, hey, that was a little too much.
Okay. Skip Mark Kelly. I'm not buying that one. North Carolina
Heard it here
first. Cooper, swing state, North Carolina. Does it give you a win? Maybe, maybe not. Shapiro, though, the next generation of Democrats, like a Brashear, super articulate, really rising stars, probably gets you a win in Pennsylvania, maybe helps you in Michigan and Wisconsin. With Harris at the top of the ticket, the fact that he's Jewish and that Hamas-Israel issue might be muted rather than if he were running with someone else, is that the smart bet for Democrats?
I still don't think that the VP candidate means much. I don't think anybody's voting for a vice president. And so it's hard to imagine a scenario whereby Harris does better if she picks Beshear versus Shapiro versus Cooper versus Kelly. I think some of it is personal chemistry. Some of it is stylistic and offsetting her strengths with their own. And I don't think that those strengths are necessarily entirely electoral. I think a lot of them have to do with charisma and speaking style and campaign style. And as far as all of these candidates are concerned, they're all incredibly qualified. They would all bring strength to a ticket. And I don't think she can go wrong. The Democrats have a deep bench. It was a bench that they didn't think that they would be tapping this time around. And so it needs to be done relatively quickly. But I think they're all win-win situations. The one candidate I would say who might have a little bit of an edge electorally is Beshear. There's no way the Democrats would win Kentucky. But I do think there's a general sense that, well, if a Democrat can be governor in Kentucky, then that person must be palatable to states like Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania. I'm not positive that that works that way, but I could imagine some voters believing that.
Okay, let's go to this coming week. What should we be looking for? What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen later tonight? What's going to happen tomorrow? Will Harris solidify this by midweek, or will we see a mini revolution? And the argument, which does make sense, that instead of her being anointed, she would be better off and a better candidate if she won the convention.
So she will have to win the convention. She might just be uncontested at the convention. The delegates still do have to cast votes for her. As I said at the beginning, if no one wants to run against her, then there's no election that can be had and there's no open contest to have. What I would say the things to look for are Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the extent to which and how quickly they endorse her. If they stand behind her within the next 24 hours, I would say it's over and she's the nominee. And then the discussion will really be about the vice presidential candidate.
All right. I'm sure we'll have you on at least once or twice this coming week. Thank you for interrupting your Sunday day to give this perspective. Incredibly valuable, an exciting time in American politics, almost nerve-wracking at the pace in which the game is being played and the game is changing. Everybody stay tuned for much more. We've had updates all day today on a number of local issues. An incident in Cranston at a bar outside the St. Mary's Feast last night, and an update on another problem at a nursing home. Much, much more. Stay tuned. We'll be running right into the evening and into tomorrow. Please, everybody, if you get a chance, keep that phone busy and enjoy this great weather. Thanks, everyone.